So, hi everybody. Hello once again. It's nice to see a pretty diverse crowd here. And today's lecture is on personal spirit. So, we're going to see in due course why spirit and why personal, right? Because this is still a new paradigm almost, this term. Okay, spirit, spiritual, but why personal? Why of the person? And is this really so? So we still, in a way, there is quite a surprise when we say personal spirit, because how can spirit be personal? But in a way, it is personal because we each are a distinct personality, and the way we express it, and the way we are in the world, and the way we leave mark in the world, we are indeed special and thus personal. So personal spirit, and it's been quite an interesting and central term to my work and seminars for the past few years, since I've been doing these online lectures and seminars. So I'm really looking forward, and I hope I will be able to convey this, what I feel and think and do about the personal spirit, and hopefully show that there is a personal spirit. And what do I mean by that? And as the heart and motor of one's progress and well-being. So this is an open public lecture. You are warmly welcome. Thank you, Stefana Savic, to organize it. And without further ado, we are going to venture into this topic. Now, as you know, I like cosmograms. I like planets and cosmology and the astrological tradition that pertains to it. And we have quite an interesting constellation in the sky this evening. It's so many planets in Aries, and the moon is angular. And of course, this time for the lecture was elected because moon symbolizes people, and we are people here indeed. So somehow this moon in Aries has brought us together. And we also have Mars and Chiron in Aries in the 7th house. So I hope for some activity that is going to take place in this lecture, and some fresh ideas kicking in and be debated. We also have Saturn and Neptune in Aries, as you already know, and we are all trying to establish some new navigating through these really intense times. And as you may have noticed, the whole spirit of the times has changed recently, and this has been reflected by Uranus entering Gemini. So we have now the mind really in its own place, don't we? So we have Gemini and Uranus, we have archetypes in the air of some new ideas. So we hope that we can develop some new ideas, and that we can really implement them, and that they can enrich our everyday lives and the way we want to lead our individual lives, and thus contribute to others, to important others, and human collective. It's also interesting that today, the very afternoon, Sun Mercury outer conjunction, this happens very quickly, as you may know. Mercury now goes quite quickly, about 2 degrees a day. So this conjunction happens really quickly in one day, or in a half a day, it's almost over. So it's time for organizing new things. So if you are thinking of organizing the rest of the year, if in case you haven't, and the next, perhaps some some steps for the next year. Now is the time to organize ourselves. We also have Venus and Jupiter, Venus in Gemini and Jupiter in Cancer, which is on the almost on midheaven here in Ljubljana. But if you look in the evening, you will see two bright stars. They are planets, actually, on the western horizon. After the sunset, you can see one bright star, like something like this above the horizon, and then another one a little bit further up, but not much further up. And the Venus is a little bit brighter from Jupiter, but not much brighter. So they're like two similarly bright stars, and they shine before any other star ignites its spark, because they are planets, right? So they are seen in the evening. They're quite beautiful. They're quite stunning. And as Plato already said, it's very important for the spirit really to observe the planets. So not actually only look the ephemeris, but actually observe the planets and see the planets and participate in their luminosity and archetypal luminosity. Now, when we talk about the personal spirit, we need to look first at what is spirit historically, and are there any historical predecessors to the personal spirit? And one of the oldest images of the spirit is the heart in old Egypt, ancient Egypt. It's the way, it was a procedure called the weighing of the heart. So the heart had to be light. It had to be as immaterial, as light as possible, in order to pass the underworld journey of the deceased person. So after you died, your heart would be put on the scale, and on the other side of the scale would be the feather. So it would have to be light as a feather. So if it was light as a feather, then it would go into eternity. And in case it wasn't, it would be fed to the dog, Anubis, and you would be returning to another incarnation, and you would have to endure the whole life anew and hopefully purify your heart. This is a wonderful image of the personal spirit, because we know that heart, if any organ, of course, not the physical heart, but the immaterial heart, is the seat of the spirit, or what I call the intuitive ego, or the spiritual ego, or the spiritual I, is I, as the seat of the personal spirit. So whatever we experience with our heart, it, in the final consequence, it should be light and benevolent. And we know it's a perpetual work we have to do in our lives to purify our hearts, to be honest, to trust, to see ahead, to really do something with our hearts. We also say, trust with our hearts, see with our hearts, see through the difficulties. So it's a perpetual training in our lives, in our individuation, in our becoming individuals in our lives, for our hearts to be as light as possible, so that our hearts can or may or are indeed able to sing in the end, after all the difficulties, during the day, and indeed after, at the moment that we die and after we die. So this connection of the spirit, of the human heart, the immaterial human heart, the spiritual human heart, something that is being passed on, has been in all old traditions. So spirit is not just immaterial, it is eternal. And the old Egyptians, they had an inkling that the spirit is personal. How would otherwise be an individual human heart weighed against the feather? It was an individual, it was a diseased person. An individual was weighed against the feather in order to be judged. Weighing of the heart, judging the heart, has to be pure and weightless. Now, when we come to the old ancient Greek forms of spirit, they were really twofold. One was to pneuma, which was a general notion of the spirit. So to pneuma was like spirit permeating all of the world. So it was a kind of a collective or general spirit. But on the other hand, there was also an individual spirit, which was called thymos, which was a spirit of a person. For example, Odysseus, when he returned to Ithaca after the whole journey in which he was transformed and traveled through the underworld and experienced the death of the hero, he was no longer a hero. He was an old man, a mature man, returning to Ithaca, and his wife Penelope, she was besieged by suitors. And so she was weaving this carpet, and in the night she was secretly again destroying this carpet. So because the story went that after she finishes the carpet, she would have to choose one of the suitors that were really there, using all the resources of Odysseus' court. So when Odysseus arrived at the very moment where the peak of all this development was taking place, he had a difficult decision to make, whether to kill the suitors or do something else, and the maids who betrayed them, his own maids who were serving these suitors and drinking his wine and food and everything. So it was Othymos, or his personal spirit, that really dictated him. He should really do that. He should really kill the suitors and really make order and restore his kingdom. And then he had, of course, other things to do in order to prove that he is the one that is the original king of Ithaca and Penelope's husband. So it was Othymos. So it was this innate, inner, personal spirit. I have forgotten to include here daimon. Daimon was also a personal spirit in ancient Greek. So the most famous daimon is Socrates, whose spirit or daimon didn't let him flee after he was accused of some infamous crime, and he didn't want to flee with his friends. His friends really wanted him that they flee together to some other place, so he would stay alive. He rather stayed and accepted the death penalty. So that was again the personal spirit. Now, when we move to the medieval times, something extraordinary happens to all spirit. So when we move from the old era into the Middle Ages, the metaphysics, the whole metaphysics of spirit, metaphysics means everything not physical. So the whole notion of spirit changes dramatically. All spirit becomes Holy Spirit. So spirit, interestingly, was not holy before. It was not part of God. But then suddenly, in the Middle Ages, In the medieval metaphysical model, when religion and philosophy were like one, so Christian philosophy in the West was also Christian religion. So they were one and the same. It was never before, and it's not now. So now we have philosophers who are not necessarily Christians, and they don't work in that Christian model. And neither was that before the Middle Ages. But in the medieval times, it was philosophy equals religion. So there was no other philosophy. There were some alchemists who tried to do some alternative versions of God, who was in the matter for alchemists, but they were really individuals who really were risking being being prosecuted by Inquisition, also some other scholars. But generally, all philosophy was really under the umbrella of theodicy, because God was the head of all religion and philosophy, and God was the authority who was also the Spirit. Now, this may for us seem something logical. Of course, Spirit is God, godly, but this is, you see, this is our historical inheritance, that we think so, that we deem so, that we feel, of course, it's natural. Spirit, immaterial, is something up. It's maybe otherworldly, it's godly, but not necessarily, no longer. In philosophy, which I accidentally studied quite a lot, in the new era, in the modern, postmodern times, philosophers, we no longer believe this. Of course, you have some Christian philosophers who still think that spirit is godly. It is one of the three faces, three images of God. But the rest of us really no longer think so. And of course, we also think of, when we say spirituality, we also think of Indian gods, for example. And we think, spirit is something that pertains to gods, to Indian gods, to Christian gods, to Allah, maybe. It's an inheritance. It's quite understandable that we find it natural, but just let us pause for a moment and think, is it really necessary that it is a face of God? Why can spirit not be human? And this is what I'm arriving at in the rest of the lecture. Why do I think spirit can be personal and is indeed personal? And why is it so important? And why is it a motor, not only the heart, but a motor, as I call it, of one's progress on one hand and well-being on the other? So just to conclude this medieval excursion, just to remind you that whatever spirit there was, it was Holy Spirit. So you could participate, if you were a medieval woman or man, you could participate in Holy Spirit, but it was not really yours. Okay, they said that spirit is also in man, but this spirit is actually Holy Spirit. So God was responsible for all spirit. God bestowed all the spirit. He guaranteed, he facilitated that humans got some spirit, but it was not without God that you could have spirit. So you participated in that spirit of God, the otherworldly God from another world, which gave birth to earth and man, and he will take them away. And he actually did. he took all this world away, and the old medieval world disappeared with the discovery of Neptune. Yeah, about discovery of Neptune, which is really the god of the era of Pisces. And at the same time, Nietzsche proclaimed the death of God, and that was the second coming of Redeemer. And from then on, we are trying to find a new understanding of, of God. Of course, if we are practicing Christians, we still believe in this Holy Spirit, but if we are not, if this is no longer alive for us, then we think about spirit in different terms. So why spirit? Okay, we already said a little bit about spirit, that this is the immaterial core of the world, of ourselves, of our immaterial heart, whatever we hope, whatever we trust, the energy, typically the energy that we experience, we may be low on energy. And there certainly are spiritual symptoms, the way I call them. Spiritual symptoms for me have to do with energy, either with lack of energy, like depression. Depression for me is a spiritual, not psychological or psychical symptom, because it's a symptom of energy. And of course, some manic states or overexcitement in a less pathological variant, there are also spiritual symptoms because they have to do with energy. So everything that has to do with energy, the energy of trust, the energy of being able to see, to trust, I am. And I always like to think about Fichte, the philosopher Fichte, Johann Gottlieb Fichte. He said, you have to do one thing, he said, if I paraphrase him. He said, you have to posit yourself in front of yourself and say, I am, because I am. And this is how you establish yourself. And you see, this is the spirit. And of course, he had many fiery planets. Johann Gottlieb Fichte, among them Moon in Aries, which is really so frequent in philosophers, because philosophers talk about spirit most of the time, implicitly or explicitly. And he said, you have to do it. Nobody is going to do it for you. And he had his public lectures. He was really provoking the church. And he was having his lectures at the same time, Sunday morning, when there was mass in the church. So you had to choose, actually, I'm going to come to the church, or you're going to come to my lecture, and we're going to posit the spirit. We are going to become spirit. And why personal? Okay, we talked a little bit about that already. And why progress and well-being? So why is spirit, and how could it be connected to progress and well-being? Now, what we normally see as spirit in modern and postmodern times, there are two forms of spirit. We all know there is a personal spirit because we say this would be his spirit, or this a typical thing he would do would be that, and that is his spirit. Even after death, we say this would be in the spirit of this person or that person. So spirit has a personal connotation. But we also have spirit of the times. Spirit of the times is a really curious phenomenon. And we all need to pay attention to the spirit of the times, because sometimes it's really not wise to oppose it. For instance, when recently, from 2020 to 2026 or 2019 until recently, this year, we had Uranus in Taurus. And the spirit of the times was really about distancing away away from the physical presence. So you could no longer be physically present in the same way it was normal before. Also, we were almost deprived of cash, so there was no physical money. Yeah, social distance, yeah, was prescribed, and physical presence was almost proscribed. It certainly was during the lockdown, and it was a collective occurrence. It's one of the rare collective occurrences that you could really see the spirit of the times really expressing itself so clearly. We had to obey. It was very dangerous. It was very dangerous if you went against that spirit. I mean, you had to get vaccinated. You had to get this uranium experiment on your body, or else it was risky. So you would either lie or get a false certificate or something, or get simply vaccinated and really take up the risk. But that was a big experiment. You could see it as the spirit of the time, as an expression of the spirit of the times that is reflected by um, the archetypal trajectory of Uranus being in Taurus, in the earthy material object archetype of Taurus. So it may not have been a conspiracy after all. You know, I don't believe in that, or it could be as well, but it is entirely possible that this was just a spirit of the times, that we really had to pay respect to the spirit of the time and said, okay, I obey, I submit. Of course, you had to submit. And then if you were lucky, you went through without consequences. So spirit of the times, or Zeitgeist, we use this German word in English to express, to describe the prevailing mood, ideas, beliefs, and attitudes that define a particular period in history. Also, a general spiritual climate of a particular period. Now, spirit of the times is really interesting because it behaves like God, really, that we need to obey. So it seems that we have another God in the age of Aquarius, which is no longer otherworldly, but quite this worldly. It affects us directly. Yeah, you have to obey and submit and be careful not to go against too much. Not to rebel too much, find your way through in your life and, individuate wisely, so to speak, in order to not to be punished or even prosecuted by authorities who, again, they represent the spirit of the times. They really defend the spirit of the time, and that's quite normal. But then on the other hand, we have this personal spirit, specific energy of a person manifesting in specific acts or non-acts, or what they refrain from doing, of a human individual. Because since spirit is so immaterial, it has no other way than to express through acts and deeds of whatever you do, or whatever you say, I won't do it, I refrain from this, I don't like it, I don't want that, I decide not to do that, but I opt to do some other thing. So see, spirit becomes quite personal, and indeed, through our deeds and non-deeds, acting, what we do, actions and non-actions, it is also, we say, oh, this person has such a nice energy, I like it. And then this person I don't like so much. Some people like them, but not me. So we like really some people, we like their spirit, But we still say, because it's more convenient to say, we like them psychologically, we like their personality, or we don't dislike their personality. So it's really more, we talk about personality, but it's not just the personality. How do we know it's not just personality? We know it's not just personality because there is a vibe, okay? There is a vibe. There is a vibe of energy that the person has, maybe an aura in which you can see. And if you don't see aura, don't worry, because nobody really sees the real aura, but you see, you somehow sense the energy. As soon as the person comes into a room, you know how they are, and you know the energy without asking them, without seeing them sometimes. You can already feel the vibe. Yeah, you feel the vibe, the positivity, the negativity, sometimes expectations. Sometimes, of course, you can feel more of this energy, sometimes less of this energy. It also depends on your own energy. So energy not only follows thought, energy is there beforehand, before we feel or think or sense something. It's the energy. So really, the heart culture is traditionally the spiritual culture. So all spirituality is about your heart, how open you can be, how well you process the difficult experience, the emotional, indeed the psychological experiences, but it is the spirit, the personal spirit that needs nurturing, so that it does not stop to trust, stop to believe, stop to hope. Heart needs to hope. Yeah. Heart also needs to see ahead, right? So if you think about the spiritual things, you will realize that spirit is really about what I call futurity. Futurity, it means that it is always ahead of the present time. So if you are a strong Aries or Leo or Sagittarius or a combination of that, you look forward already. Yeah. Like especially Aries, because it's cardinal spirit. They like to speak. Oh, we are already there. Oh, it's so fun. How do you know we are not even there? Yes, but I feel, I can see. You see, they look forward, you think, but it's more than that, because the spirit always seizes further as he or she would be already there. So that seems to be the basic characteristic of the spirit. The spirit is already in the future. If we didn't have the spirit, we would lose hope and, above all, meaning. You all know about Viktor Frankl, who was in concentration camp, and what saved him was his great personal spirit, because he was imagining the lectures he's going to give after the concentration camp, and he was really envisioning his future in freedom. And he wasn't, but you know, I always think when I think spirit, you know, this song, "We Shall Overcome," you know, the slave song. So we are all slaves for some part of our lives, but we have our hearts and we believe in this futurity. We shall overcome, right? We shall overcome. And then we die, we overcome this difficulty of being in the physical incarnation. So you see, we have, maybe spirit is something that lives on and that is eternal. Certainly futuristic, all forms of spirit, it goes forward, it bridges, also bridging. Bridge is one of the most important symbols of the spirit. So we not only go after, we want to bridge the difficult waters and ease our minds and psyche, and of course, body. Now, one of the most wonderful images of the personal spirit is what we find in infants, the energy we find in infants. A baby, when he or she is born, has a particular way of behavior, a physical behavior, and also the voices that they utter. It's something specific. Each baby has something that is quite unique and inimitable, non-repeatable, and there are no two babies are alike, and they have different energies. So it is there straight for the beginning. They always seize, and and if you give them your hand, they like to feel there is another body there, because they're almost without body. They need the body of the mother, and then later of other people, that they can kick against. So really, this is early boxing that is happening there, and that this is how they develop, because their bodies are too weak. They need the mother's body. And why do I say this is spirit? Because psychoanalysis, not only because of that, but psychoanalysis has realized that the psyche is not of the baby in their first 6 months. During the first 6 months, they have no psyche almost, because psyche is historical, and psyche comes from the actual experience that the infant has. So the infant borrows the psyche of the mother, and their psychic egos, they are born at about 6 months old, but before they have psychic ego, they have their spirit. Obviously, this energy is there, and it's very personal, it's intensely individual, and they want to live, don't they? And they teach us, they remind us, we reawaken and said, oh my God, I forgot how important it is to live. Look at this baby, how he kicks and then he walks, and the way he imitates first the voices and so on, and the despair when they get lost into the void, but their spirit is lost and they fall into the void, and they need to be held. So the body of the mother is of key importance, so that they get back. They said, oh, I'm here, I can feel myself. So they stop shouting, and they shout out of despair. So despair is also a spiritual symptom, this intense void. It's not a psychological, it's a spiritual symptom. And with development, this spirit has to conform, it has to submit. Yeah. So we are getting into training, into anal training, as Freud described, toilet training, and then the Oedipal training, and then education, school age training, and so on. So this spirit has to make concessions. So we are, in a way, becoming collective creatures throughout our first half of lives. So this is what I call the individuation process in the wider general sense. We all go through similar developmental stages in which we become individuals, but not necessarily special individuals, but we all develop in a certain way, with the proscriptions, with the rules, or with the development of what Freud called the superego, or the primary morale, what one should do and what one shouldn't do. And one of the ways how we see this development are symbolic forms. Now, symbolic forms, it's a really interesting expression coined by Ernst Cassirer. He's not a mainstream philosopher, but a philosopher nevertheless. And he developed this philosophy of symbolic forms. Symbolic forms are all forms of organization of the human collective in which we grow, develop, work daily. We do the same thing daily, and humanity has invented symbolic forms. And of course, the first in which they have their rules, they have their dynamics, so they try to straighten you, so to speak. The spirit will not always comply, but eventually it has to comply. And if these symbolic forms are not too strict and not too disorganized, on the other hand, for example, if you have difficult situations in the primary family, which is a symbolic form, like illnesses or absences, so these symbolic forms has holes. So the personal spirit cannot be tempered, cannot be integrated in the same way when you have a symbolic form, a primary family that is able to contain properly, but also allow enough freedom for the personal spirit of the child to be expressed. So symbolic forms is really a useful notion if you think, education, school, frames of education, and then peer groups, a religious upbringing. If you go to church, you have another symbolic form there. And then forms of employment during your first half of life. And then family of one's own or equivalent, or you do some other thing. But and you see this is not about the child, but also about the mother and father during the first half of life, when you have to change about your child, but you also have to go to the city and work there, and then run into the kindergarten to pick up your child, and then at home you have all other things to do. So it can be pretty intense and very little time for your own personal spirit, because you are harnessed, what I call harnessed. You are harnessed into the symbolic forms of the human collective, and you have to pay, so to speak, pay energy, pay tax to the collective, not just the government tax, but also other things are tax. And you give energy. It means that you give energy to your family members of your own, to your parents when they need care, to your people. If you are a therapist, you look after professionally, etc. So that is individuation in the wider general sense. Personal spirit remains in the background because we have to do gladly what we have to do. So this is really personal spirit during the first half of life. We have to do gladly what we have to do, and we have to conform if we want to come through, and eventually maybe have some time on our own, have some fun at the end, and so our spirit, really personal spirit, can really be nurtured as well. Now, when we come to the individuation in the narrower sense, so this is just a model, right? So the first half of life, sometimes, some individuals, they already show extraordinary personal spirit in the first half of life. So they will start to work individually. They will make individual decisions, and they will survive with that or not. They will have to withdraw or not. But model-wise, this is what Jung, I think Jung was quite right in this respect. He says that the midlife is this transition there is another half of life in which the individuation in a narrower sense starts to begin. And it's the journey into the depth that has to be undertaken. And Jung was the model of that journey into into the depth. So we have to look into ourselves, into our own psyche, because the psyche is the seat of individuality. And why is that? This is because individuality is really in your history. When by the time you are 40, you will have enough material that makes you individual. So when you work on yourself psychologically, with the analysis of dreams, of active imagination, and then you analyze your material, you will see that you have so much material during these 4 decades that you can learn about individuality, and you see the patterns, psychological patterns that you need to make meaning of. And we do meaning with the archetypes of our cosmogram. And when working on ourselves with the IPAL method, or elsewhere. And this is how we liberate our personal spirit. So whatever we knew and we wished, and what is really important in terms of the personal spirit is the childhood fantasies. Whatever childhood fantasies you had, you would become. They're very important for when you start working on yourself in depth, because they are really the stirrings, the original and authentic stirrings of the person's spirit. So if you haven't tried before, you have to try it. You have to try it now, once you're 40, or maybe sometime before that. So to find activities, because personal spirit is about bodily activity. Your personal spirit is immaterial. So the only way you can try how to nurture and develop and strengthen your personal spirit is to try different activities. Then you will see what really makes your heart sing, what is really meaningful, what really gives you energy back and not only drains you of energy. So some activities, they will be nurturing your personal spirit, and some of them will be to no avail in terms of your energy. So you have to try different things. You always want it, but you may also not have wanted, never thought about them. And maybe an astrologer can help you, because they have this map, they have this cosmogram, and they may even suggest to you what you could try to make you more energized, to level up your energy, because this is what we do when we align ourselves with the archetypes of our cosmogram. So if you have, for example, Moon in Taurus in the 5th, and then you, for example, an astrologer tells you, or somebody who knows cosmograms, is not everybody is an astrologer. They do not all read your fate, but they may be an inkling that maybe you could do some gardening, Taurus in the 5th, and when you try this gardening, that you will be energized, because there is an archetype there. So alignment with the archetype gives you energy and liberates your personal spirit. So there are 3 levels of the personal spirit. If we look at the cosmological mandala or zodiac, we see there are 3 fiery archetypes: Sagittarius, Leo, and Aries. So being willing to explore diverse activities, that and that and that, and then something will eventually ignite my energy, that is Sagittarius. So wherever you have Sagittarius in your chart, the activities of that house, if you have Sagittarius in the 12th, meditation and solitude will give you the will of exploring life, you see? This is the way we can use our birth charts to help strengthening personal spirit. Being centered in one's spiritual heart. If you have Leo in the 8th, you have to do it really in depth. You will find your heart as the seat of your personal spirit, really in the depth. Sometimes when you experience death, not only depth, Depth and depth, they're incidentally together in the symbolism of the eighth house. And then to activate the will, which is Aries, to be willing to take on challenges and risks. No risk, no fun, you know. So you have to take some risk, and the primary area of life where we should take up risk, of course, risks that I can really feel it's meaningful, is the area of life where you have Aries in your, not so much Mars, no. First of all, Aries, yeah, but then also Mars, who is the cosmological ruler of Aries. So personal spirit becomes at the center of one's life. It means doing activities willingly, simply. It's not simple. After you find it, it becomes simple. Once you are in it, it's simple, but it's not so simply. It should really be put into inverted commas. Simply because one personally enjoys and wants them to do. So the energy. So you may like to think about this image of really it's in your heart, but it's also around you. So that's the personal spirit. Personal spirit at the center of one's well-being, the energy factor, creation of meaning, not so much making sense of things, but meaning, the energy. Meaning is when we are energized. For example, if you have a dream of a numb left hand, one patient had this dream that his left hand was numb in a dream. So, and indeed, when he was sleeping, it was under his shoulder, so it was numb when he dreamt about it. So it came into his dream, but it was not incidental. No dream is incidental because it's a psychic image. So when we talked about this dream, he suddenly remembered that he's left-handed, that at that time it was not considered good to be left-handed, so he had to be converted to a right-hand person, but that came at a price. And he secretly still was drawing with his left hand, and he did some wonderful images, actually. He drew some images during his high school with his left hand, and then he realized there is something there. And of course, then we talked about that, and he started drawing images and so on. But then I said, where would you put this image into your chart? So that is the IPAL method, really, at its best. And he didn't know symbolic cosmology. But I said, okay, just point. And he pointed to his Pluto in the 5th house. And then when we talked about this archetype of taboo Pluto, of proscription, he was not allowed, he was deprived from his natural creativity, Pluto in the 5th. He saw the meaning, you see. So meaning is really non-verbal. Meaning is not, so rationally, nothing changed. So rationally, he still understood his history of this image that he dreamt of. But then when he realized and understood this is synchronous or synchronistic with his Pluto in the 5th, with the symbolism, he suddenly said, wow, this is wonderful. Now I can see this is meaning. You see, this is meaning, and this is the spirit. This is what I mean by the distinction between sense and meaning. Sense is something we can think about and thinkingly analyze, but meaning is something different. Meaning is really in the heart. So he saw the archetype, so to speak, and how his Pluto eventually will give way. Even Persephone comes out. So this is the futurity of any archetype. So in the end, Persephone will come out. She will be allowed to come out back to the surface, out of the underworld into which she was dragged because she was resisting her initiation into womanhood and couldn't separate from her mother. But then she was dragged, she was kidnapped by Pluto, and she had to endure difficult times in the concentration camp, so to speak, in the underworld concentration camp. And then things changed back after a while, after this ordeal. So that was the meaning. You see, this man started to draw, liberated his energies, and even included one of the older son was problematic. They didn't have a good relationship, so they opened up, they started to draw together images, which is again the symbolism of the fifth house, and meaning was created. So personal spirit was liberated. How do we know? Because of the energy that was enhanced and liberated. So the inner power, openness to experience, the will to live, trust in one's own handling of life conflicts. I don't know how I'm going to handle this problem, but I am going to find a way. So that is also this is the trust, the basic trust. It is also a sign of a well-maintained personal spirit. So the message is personal spirit needs to be nurtured by working on oneself in depth with the symbols, with dreams. And personal spirit can also be measured by the degree of basic contentment with one's life. So this is why personal spirit is really the heart and motor of one's progress on one hand, individuation, and well-being on the other. This is the last slide, and then hopefully we're going to have some discussion. So releasing the personal spirit from the psychic bubbles of one's historicity by placing the psychic images into the cosmogram and then extract the meaning. So this is an alchemical procedure. So alchemy is no longer out there somewhere, but it's in the working in oneself now, in the age of Aquarius, age of man and woman. The importance of psychic coagulated images, but also of physical events. You can put any physical event into your cosmogram and you extract meaning in a parallel way. But the thing with the psychic images is that they are more potent in terms of releasing energy. So cosmogram was a unique opportunity for unlocking one's spirit. We went a little bit over time because I wanted to be 45 minutes, but I got so much I got aligned with the material so much that I have prolonged a little bit, but we still have some time so we can hopefully make some discussion. Thank you. And before we go apart, I would just like to share just a few information what you can do in the future with us. So there will be an international summer school. We still have 3 places. We have 6 participants with Stefana. There will be another public event, which will be book launch of the 4 books that I have written on planets as individuation agencies. This will be taking place on 24th of June in the evening. So you're cordially invited. This is a free public event. And there will be a new introductory group, international introductory group online, 50 meetings starting in autumn. We haven't got the date yet. But if you think of traveling systematically through the archetypes of cosmos and individuation, then this is the right group for you. It will be a small group, 4 to 6 members. I'm looking forward to start. I don't have enough time to do this, but I want to do this. So I will put things aside and said, this is introductory group. I want to go with it. So I'm looking forward to work with you in that introductory group. And these are some new seminars in the academic year 2026, 2027, 10 seminars. Selected themes on the individuation process, projection and complexes, then the eternal child, spirit of the depths, individual and collective images of God, ego, persona, being and being, anima and animals, the two faces of Saturn individuating, identity in the individuation process, incompleteness of one's individuating, and the forms of transcendence in the individuation process. So this was a short information on what you can join, either in terms of a free public event. There will also be another public lecture in the early September, or if you want to commit more, you're also cordially invited to enter the training, indeed, in the IPAL method. So thank you all for being here. I could feel the presence, really. Also the ones that you didn't have your cameras on. I could still feel there are people there, real people there. And I hope to see you again soon. And see you soon, here and there and everywhere, in the spirit, in the body, in the psyche, and with some good new ideas.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.